This is a very good opportunity to talk about one of the most famous liches in D&D. We have Vecna appearing in Stranger Things. Vecna has been a lich in D&D for a very long time, and today we're talking about the D&D Vecna. Tell me about the origin story for Vecna.
Vecna's been around forever. Vecna showed up in the earliest books of D&D. He started off really as just a pair of magic items. Let's put it that way. There were in, I believe, Eldritch Wizardry, back in the 70s, a pair of magic items called the Eye and the Hand of Vecna. These are the sole living remains of a very powerful, long-dead lich. It's hard to destroy a lich, as it turns out, and this particular lich basically left behind two powerful body parts that became two of the most famous artifacts in the D&D game. The eye and the hand are separate items, but they become more powerful if you have both of them. And in order to use them, you have to basically carve out your own eye and replace it with the Eye of Vecna, or chop off your own hand and replace it with Vecna's hand. And for those who are real lore nerds, it was the left eye and the left hand.
You gotta be committed.
Yes, it is a commitment to sort of bond with these magic items if you want to channel some of Vecna's great power. Vecna is a figure of great mystery in D&D and has long been. He has many different names, goes by many different guises. He's the Dying King, he's the Undying King, he's the Whispered One. All of these different colorful names used to describe him. And he has evolved over the years from being an obscure entity of legend to an actual lich or demi-lich. He got elevated at one point to a demigod status officially in D&D over the course of a series of adventures.
Any specific lore bits, or has it always been really obscure when it comes to Vecna, very kind of open?
Vecna,
do we know where Vecna's from? Do we know
Vecna originated as an entity on Greyhawk, or rather Orioth, or the world of Greyhawk. He sort of started out there, but then went cosmic. Like I said, he's sort of been shunted to various planes. At one point, he was the Dark Lord of a Ravenloft domain until that ceased to exist. But we don't know much about Vecna's sort of day-to-day life because it's so shrouded in mystery, and as an entity, he's so profoundly evil that you just don't want to look under that rock because you won't like what you find. That said, there is some lore tied to Vecna that has survived through multiple editions. One of the best pieces of that is his lieutenant, who they had a falling out, and it led this lieutenant named Kas was actually responsible for mutilating Vecna to the extent that he lost a hand and an eye. That conflict consumed Kas as well, and all he left behind was a badass sword. And so that conflict, Vecna versus Kas, is sort of etched in the minds of many old school D&D players as kind of one of the earliest codified personal vendetta conflicts in the game's history.
And that's a magical item as well.
Yes, the Sword of Kas is a magic item, which along with the Eye and Hand of Vecna, they all appear in the Dungeon Master's Guide.
And that sword very much wants to hunt down Vecna.
Yeah, it's not a nice sword. Like everything surrounding Vecna, it's probably best left alone, but it's an irresistible lure for many adventurers.
There's been a redesign of Vecna, and they've made it, if you can make a lich even more intimidating, but weirdly utilitarian, because Vecna created the Book of Vile Darkness, and that now fits underneath Vecna's ribcage and just sits in there. What is the Book of Vile Darkness? This has been around in D&D lore for some time, but you have lots of lists in 5th edition for what the Book of Vile Darkness does, but also the worst of the worst secrets are in this, correct?
Yeah, the Book of Vile Darkness in D&D is the book of ultimate evil, basically. It is the worst of all possible books. And It has been around almost as long or as long as the Hand and Eye of Vecna and the Sword of Kos. It's also in the Dungeon Master's Guide. It is a bad book, full of bad secrets. Now, it was actually made manifest in 3rd edition when we released a product called The Book of Vile Darkness by Monty Cook, where we just basically put a bunch of evil stuff. You could basically jump in the pool of badness and flail around in there and enjoy it for a short time before you self-destructed your character.
And lichdom is a real shady kind of thing, right? Like, to
Yes.
become a lich like Vecna, you have to do some bad.
Yeah, and the secret to lichdom is closely guarded. Vecna may have been the first to actually transform successfully into a lich. Folks like Orcus guard that secret and don't give it to mortals willy-nilly. So you kind of have to earn it. And the way a lot of wizards earn the knowledge or discover the knowledge to becoming a lich requires them to do bad things to find that knowledge. Often terrible, terrible, terrible things. And the whole goal of becoming a lich, of course, is to avoid death, to exist forever in a kind of an indestructible or nearly indestructible state.
And that's where the phylactery comes in.
The concept of when you destroy the lich, its essence gets transferred to a receptacle until such time as the lich can reform. And the only way you can guarantee its destruction is to destroy that receptacle. He'd have such a receptacle, but who knows where in the cosmos it is. It is almost assuredly not under his mattress.
What? How do you recommend running Vecna or playing as Vecna? Because so many people have taken their turn. Matt Mercer has run Vecna. How
and
Vecna would be.
Very successfully, I think. I think there's a good example or model to follow where Vecna starts off as just not even announced by name. His presence is just sort of felt. There are villains in the story who have some sort of connection to this mysterious entity, the Whispered One, and they're gaining secrets and power from it. But what is it? We don't know. You might see descriptions in a book that allude to this ancient entity of secrets who discovered a whole bunch of evil lore and is basically sitting on it and feeding it out to people. But to what end? And you just sort of peel back the onion, the Vecna onion, and conquering cults and foes who are sort of tied to this entity. And only then do you sort of provoke Vecna's interest, and he may glare down at you and meddle in your affairs more directly, culminating in maybe some monumental event. Because one thing that Vecna has always strove for is godhood. It is sort of the narcissist's dream, right? And Vecna has chased it throughout adventures that we have published featuring him. And so even he has not achieved everything yet in some versions of this story. And I think that's another way you can do is you're basically trying to stop this powerful evil from ascension to some higher, more damaging, form. Another way to go is to just the way of 4th edition, where he's part of a pantheon of gods, albeit a secretive and evil one. And you can have temples which are like libraries that hide away, bits of Vecna's lore, and you're not fighting the god directly, but you're basically dealing with all of its minions.
If you liked this interview and you'd like to see more, go ahead and like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that little bell symbol so you're notified anytime a video like this comes out. Thank you so much for watching.